Welcome to Soulstonia. This is pre-alpha gameplay, so a lot of what you see here is not yet complete, and still a work in progress. For this walkthrough, we're going to follow a new summoner through the opening of the game and the first few quests in the grasslands. Soulstonia is divided into 5 major regions. At the center of the continent are the grasslands, surrounded by the desert to the south, the jungle to the east, the icelands to the north, and the volcano to the west. Each region has its own environment, resources, creatures, characters, quests, and more. But while those 5 regions give the world its overall structure, the actual world is procedurally generated. Villages, roads, resources, enemies, NPCs, points of interest, and other landmarks can appear in different places from one save to another. Here, we have our first summoner. Summoners are the characters you recruit and develop throughout the game. We're controlling this one directly right now, but direct control is optional. A summoner can also decide what to do on their own. They can gather resources, train skills, fight enemies, pick up items, and perform other activities without requiring constant input from the player. At any point, we can take back control. So the same systems we're going to interact with manually in this walkthrough can eventually become part of the summoner's daily routine. Our first quest comes from Sawyer. Sawyer is convinced that the end of the world is approaching, and naturally, his solution is to build a very large beacon. This first quest introduces 3 of Soulstonia's skills: woodcutting, construction, and firemaking. He starts us off with a bronze axe. With the axe equipped, we can begin cutting nearby trees. Activities in Soulstonia are tied to skills, so chopping trees earns woodcutting experience, while also producing logs that can be used elsewhere. There are 18 core skills covering combat, gathering, and crafting, and they aren't isolated systems. What we gather through one skill frequently becomes the material for another. That's what we're about to do with these logs. Sawyer doesn't have much use for raw logs, so our next stop is a sawmill. Here, those logs can be processed into planks. This is a simple example of the resource chain that runs through much of the game. Resources are gathered from the world, processed using different skills and objects, and eventually turned into equipment, structures, food, runes, or other useful items. Across Soulstonia, there are locations where structures can be built. Here, we're using one to build Sawyer's beacon. From here, we'll find Angelica. Soulstonia isn't divided into separate quest levels. The quests, resources, characters, enemies, and villages all exist together in the generated world, so traveling between objectives is also a part of exploring it. As the map is uncovered, locations can be discovered and revisited later. Angelica has a slightly different problem. She needs something to eat, but she's having a hard time bringing herself to kill the local shrimp. She gives us a fishing rod, which lets us start training fishing. Fishing spots can be found near water throughout Soulstonia. The species available depend on where you are in the world, and what we catch can then become ingredients for cooking. For this quest, we just need 3 shrimp. Unfortunately, handing her 3 raw shrimp doesn't really solve her problem. She would also like us to cook them. We already know how to gather wood, so this time we're combining that with a different activity. We chop a log, and use the flint Angelica gave us to light the bonfire. Now we can cook the shrimp. Cooking turns gathered ingredients into usable food and has its own progression alongside fishing and other gathering skills. This is the general idea behind a lot of Soulstonia's progression. The player isn't choosing a single profession or character class at the beginning of the game. The same summoner can spend time fishing, mining, smithing, fighting, cooking, building, using magic, or training any of the other available skills. So far, everything has been fairly peaceful. Our next quest changes that. Meet Slasher. Slasher believes muscle is cheap and metal is truth. Bronze requires 2 different types of ore. First, we're going to mine copper. And then tin. Mining nodes can contain different metals, gemstones, and other resources depending on what is available in that part of the world. Like woodcutting and fishing, mining is both its own form of progression and the beginning of a larger production chain. At the furnace, copper and tin can be combined into bronze bars. Those bars are now usable smithing materials. So we've gone from resources found naturally in the world to refined metal And next, we're going to turn that metal into equipment. Slasher gives us a hammer and sends us to an anvil. For our first equipment, we're going to make a bronze sword and shield. Weapons and armor are gear rather than permanent character choices. A summoner's capabilities come from the combination of the skills they've trained and the equipment they're currently using. That means the same summoner can develop across many different activities instead of being locked into a traditional RPG class. Now, we actually have something to fight with. We return to Slasher with the finished equipment. Apparently, making a sword isn't enough. Slasher would like us to test it. So our final objective is to kill 3 goblins. Combat begins when our summoner engages a target. Once engaged in combat, basic attacks happen automatically, while the player determines things like equipment, combat style, targets, movement, and what the summoner should be doing. Our combat skills develop independently as they're used. Melee is only one option. Summoners can also develop ranged, magic, and summoning as they progress. And just like Gathering, combat doesn't always have to be directly controlled by the player. Summoners are capable of defending themselves and can encounter and fight enemies while operating on their own. That's especially important as you recruit additional summoners and begin managing a party instead of just one character. Soulstonia is designed around letting collection, crafting, and combat systems overlap. You can follow quests and explore the world directly, specialize a summoner in particular skills, recruit a party with different strengths, or simply give them some freedom and see what they decide to do. And because the world itself is generated for each save, the exact version of Soulstonia that they inhabit will be different each time. With the goblins defeated, that So Metal is complete. This is still pre-alpha, and there's a lot more to show. Thanks for tuning in.